Welcome back to the channel. This will be the chip strategy guide for UCL Fantasy. I made one last season with this exact same format for the Champions League, but I've got a different set of ideas now for using the wildcard and limitless chips, and I'll also be providing some tips on how to play UCL Fantasy in general in terms of the transfers, the allocation of players, so you have all the basics covered. And I'd also encourage you to check out my How to Play UCL Fantasy guide for even more details on how to play one of the best fantasy games, in my opinion. But let me know down in the comment section below, do you prefer this over FPL, and which parts of this game do you not understand? If you have played Club World Cup Fantasy, the Euros, the World Cup, then this will be very similar to you, but there are some key differences which will be discussed throughout this podcast. Be sure to drop it a like, subscribe to my channel, and also hit the notification bell so you're always up to date with my content, both FPL and UCL Fantasy. There'll be multiple live streams for both fantasy formats and also videos across the season, so you're well prepared to do really well in the Champions League and Premier League this season and win your mini leagues in the process. Check all the links in the description for my Patreon and the championships, for likes to my videos, amongst many other perks. You can click the join button on YouTube or type in patreon.com/FPLDylan on any browser. There's also my Discord server, the UCL Fantasy League, and Spotify in the description. But without further ado, let's jump straight into it. Let's start off by discussing the wildcard, which will be familiar to you if you have played FPL or the other fantasy games I discussed earlier. This chip allows you to make unlimited changes, and any players you buy will remain in your squad once that match day is finished. It can only be used once throughout the tournament, but can be deployed at any time except match days 1, 9, and 11, because on those specific match days, we have unlimited transfers and you can't use any chip. That includes the Limitless and the Wildcard. And unlike that other booster, the Limitless, you have budget constraints with this chip. All hits will be cancelled, and this booster is irreversible once it's been activated. Normal rules for substitutions, formations, and captaincy still apply. Now, some of these aspects will be similar with the Limitless. This allows you to make unlimited changes, but only for a single match day, unlike the wildcard, which enforces permanent changes to your squad. Once the match day is finished, your squad will go back to how it was before you activated the Limitless. There are no budget restrictions with this particular booster, and it can only be used once throughout the tournament, but can be played at any time except match days 1, 9, and 11. Just like the wildcard, all hits will be cancelled. This chip is also irreversible once you confirm this booster and make those transfers. Normal rules for subs, formations, and captaincy also still apply, but it's probably worth comparing both of them directly with this table, which can be found on the UEFA website. So both the wildcard and the Limitless have one chip available throughout the season, and you can't have one for the league phase and then one for the knockout stages. In terms of unlimited transfers, both of them will grant it, but with the budget, only the Limitless will give you no budget restrictions, whilst with the wildcard, you have to conform with that 100 million budget between match days 1 to 8, and we do get a 5 million increase in later rounds, and the team will reset once the match day is over, only in the case of the Limitless, but the wildcard enforces permanent changes to your squad. Let's also discuss transfers, which are very important. You can only roll them in the league phase for a maximum of 3 transfers at your disposal. For every transfer you make beyond your quota of 3 transfers, you'll have 4 points deducted from your total, which is the same in Fantasy Premier League. No free transfers are carried forward after activating the wildcard or Limitless, and compared to the knockouts, fewer transfers are granted in the league phase. This reinforces the popular chip strategy of using the wildcard and Limitless chips early on, which I've done every season except in the previous campaign. Now, with this transfer table, you can see before the league phase, which is where we are right now, going into match day 1, we have unlimited transfers. Then between match days 2 to 8, throughout the entire league phase, we get 2 free transfers per match day, and if you roll and make no single transfer whatsoever, you can have up to 3 available moves at your disposal. And before the knockout playoff rounds in match day 9, we get unlimited transfers once more, and for match day 10, so the second leg of the knockout playoff round, we get 2 free transfers. And guess what? Going into match day 11 for the round of 16, we get unlimited transfers for the last time, and then it's a similar pattern to what we've seen over the years in UCL Fantasy, even before the changes to the format that we saw last year. So we get 3 transfers for the second leg of the round of 16, quarterfinals, and semi-finals, and for the first leg of every single round, for the quarterfinals in match day 13, 15 for the semi-finals, of course, and the Champions League final in match day 17, we get 5 free transfers. So that pattern repeats itself. For the second leg, it's free, and for the first leg of each round, besides the round of 16 of course, we get 5 free transfers, which makes it even easier to optimize our UCL fantasy squads in the knockout stages. In terms of the player limit, we can currently pick 3 players from the same club between match days 1 to 8. This increases to 4 between match days 9 and 10 and remains the same for the round of 16 as well. But then we get another increase by match day 13 for the quarterfinals. And then before we get to the semi-finals, of course, that's when we get another increase to 6 players per club. And going into the Champions League final for match day 17, where you can't make substitutions or change the captaincy, by the way, we can have 8 players from one finalist and 7 from the other to make up your entire 50-man squad. I've also made a table comparing different chip strategies. So on the left-hand side, you can see using both chips early, and on the right, you can save one or possibly both chips for the knockout stages. But ultimately, what I always recommend is using the Limitless in the group stages, aka the league phase, and you could maybe save the wildcard for the knockouts as I did last season. But let's compare these different points one by one. We can target the weakest teams and earn even higher scores in the earlier rounds, which facilitates using the Limitless and Wildcard between match days 2 and 8. Now, on the other hand, rotation is more common during the league phase, so chips could be wasted earlier on, but UCL Fantasy is still a short format compared to FPL, so getting off to a strong start remains crucial, but we can build a better wildcard team later in the competition as we identify the best players and teams this season. But the wildcard or Limitless can help you to tackle rotation in matchday 8. I wouldn't recommend using the Limitless though in matchday 8 because you can't make subs just like you can't in matchday 17, for example. So those 2 match days are kind of in their own sphere. Matchday 8, the culmination of the league phase, and of course matchday 17, which has the Champions League final. So in that particular round, you can only pick a starting 11. Everyone on your bench is redundant. So if you use the Limitless chip, you deprive yourself of having really expensive options coming off your bench and giving you the ability to get even more points in a given round. But using the wildcard in matchday 8 could essentially turn that into a Limitless chip because you can cheap out your bench and then spend all your money in the starting 11. So if you have any questions about that, then let me know down the comment section below. But as it says on the right hand side, all matchday 8 fixtures are played at the same time, so manual subs can't be made. There are more transfers in the knockouts as well as a 5 million increase to our budget, and that will be very handy in building a very solid foundation for the knockout stages. But there is a risk of having multiple eliminated players, so the wildcard can bail you out, and it did to a certain extent for me last season when I used it in matchday 13. The league phase will last 5 months, so using the chips early can help you navigate injuries, changes in form, and suspensions. But let's say, for example, you're planning to use the wildcard in matchday 2, which is definitely a viable strategy. It also means if you get more injuries in future international breaks, like the ones in October and November, you're not going to be in a great position there to tackle that because you only get 2 free transfers per match day and you would have used your wildcard earlier on. So there are risks with every single chip strategy involved, even the one that I'm going to recommend to you throughout this video. But with fewer international breaks taking place in early 2026, only one in March, for example, there should be less fatigue and rotation, so the best players will start unless they get injured. Now, manual subs aren't possible in matchday 17 for the Champions League final, which I always make a big point of. And having the wildcard in the knockouts allows you to pick more differentials and be more aggressive. You could pick players from teams that you expect to be eliminated, but they might score a lot of goals in the process. I used the example of Gyökeres last season, for example, with him scoring so many goals, but Sporting in the end didn't qualify to the knockout stages, but they were in such a great position at that stage. But if you pick that sort of player, a lethal goal scorer from a lower ranked team, they could still give you the points necessary in the knockout stages and the round of 16 or quarterfinals, but they might get eliminated. Yeah, you get those points in the process because you've got the wild card to bail you out and you can get rid of those eliminated players very easily. It would be more difficult with only 3 transfers, but as I mentioned before, we get more free transfers in the knockout stages compared to the league phase, and that should be taken into account when deciding when to wildcard and Limitless. The same goes for the fixtures, and this is the FDR for all 36 teams. A big shout out to FPL Manual on Twitter. He is one of the best UCL fantasy content creators on that platform, and I've used that table and kind of shaped it into my own with my sort of difficulty ratings applied. And you might disagree with some of them, but I think on the whole, it is based on the odds and also the favourites to win the Champions League and stuff like that. So Napoli are ranked top in terms of their fixture difficulty rating. Tottenham Hotspur are second. Juventus, Bayern Munich and Real Madrid are in the top 5. and the likes of Barcelona, Arsenal, Chelsea, Liverpool, and Ajax make up the top 10, but there's also an element of the quality of teams. Now, PSG are all the way down in 20th with some very difficult fixtures on paper, but they are still one of the best teams in Europe. They are the current Champions League holders, of course, and that should also not be ignored completely. But Napoli face Man City away first in Matchday 1, and then they have excellent fixtures, arguably up until Matchday 8, when they face Chelsea at home. They face Sporting, PSV, Frankfurt, Karabag, Benfica, and Copenhagen in between, and there is definitely debate to say that Spurs have better fixtures, but there's not much in it between those two. And in the case of Tottenham Hotspur, they face PSG away in Matchday 5. The other fixtures are quite favourable, and they have 3 grey fixtures in there, whilst obviously Napoli only have 2, and that's the reason why I have put the Italian champions up front. But I think those two have great assets in every single position, and they should definitely be considered for your UCL fantasy teams. In the case of Juventus, of course, they do start off with Dortmund, Villarreal, and Real Madrid, but from Matchday 4 to 8, they have the best fixtures of any team in the Champions League, facing Sporting, Bodo Glimt, Paphos, Benfica, and Monaco. Now, Bayern Munich have a tricky start, facing Chelsea, PSG and Arsenal over the first 5 match days, but there is Paphos and Club Brugge in between, and to round off the league phase, they have Sporting, Union Saint-Gilloise, and PSV. In the case of Real Madrid, they have a good start, but then it's a bit tricky in the middle, facing Liverpool and Man City, and to be honest, Juventus could be classed as a red fixture at home as well. I've only done that for the away games to Juventus in this FDR. Barcelona are 6th, and while some FDRs that I've seen have Newcastle ranked as an easy fixture, I don't think going to St James's Park is necessarily that easy, so I've classed it as a red, and the way I've kind of done it is these purple ones you see are the most difficult fixtures. They would be ranked as a 5 out of 5 in terms of difficulty, or 1 out of 5 depending on how you look at it. Now the red fixtures, so like Newcastle away, that you see for Matchday 1 in the case of Barcelona, that will be the second most difficult set of fixtures you can get. The grey ones are kind of in the middle, and certain teams like Dortmund and Juventus would be classed as red away from home, but grey in home matches. And then, of course, light green is going to be the second set of easiest fixtures you can find, whilst dark green is the best fixtures on paper. And there you've got the likes of Karabag, Slavia Prague at home, Paphos, and a few other teams like Kara Almaty, who are making their first ever Champions League appearance. But what I also want to do is look at the easier fixtures, because this will help us with our chip strategy, and we can also focus on the best teams in this competition. So in the case of Napoli, the fixtures I really want to target for them are Sporting at home, arguably, PSV away, Karabag at home, and Copenhagen away. So that takes place in match days 2, 3, 5, and 7. Now in the case of Tottenham Hotspur, for the first 2 match days, they have green fixtures against Villarreal at home and Bodo Glimt away, who they faced in the Europa League last season. Then it's Copenhagen at home in match day 4, and also Slavia Prague at home in match day 6. In the case of Juventus, they've got Sporting and Bodo Glimt in match days 4 and 5, and also Paphos, which is a home fixture for them. Bayern Munich face Paphos away and Club Brugge at home in match days 2 and 3. There is also Sporting at home in match day 6, but I think even more appealing fixtures would include Union Saint-Gilloise at home and PSV away for the final 2 match days. And Real Madrid have Marseille at home and Kara Almaty away in the first 2 match days. And the next green fixture, so to speak, would be all the way in match day 7 against Monaco at home. With Barcelona, match day 3 and 4 looks quite appealing for them, facing Olympiacos and Club Brugge. Then there's Slavia Prague away in match day 7 and Copenhagen at home, which is one of the best fixtures you can find in match day 8. In the case of Arsenal, it's Olympiacos at home in match day 2, Slavia Prague away in match day 4, Club Brugge away in match day 6, and Kara Almaty at home. And I think facing them away would be more challenging with the travel distances and also the pitch that you play on, but having them at home is one of the best fixtures you can ask for on paper. Whilst Chelsea have Ajax at home and Karabag away in match days 3 and 4. There's also Paphos at home in match day 7, and Chelsea have good fixtures overall. In the case of Liverpool, they only have 2 really appealing fixtures on paper, facing PSV at home in match day 5 and Karabag at home in match day 8. Now, Ajax have some underrated fixtures in my opinion, but maybe not the UCL Fantasy assets to boot, with the likes of Galatasaray at home in match day 4, Karabag away in match day 6, and Olympiacos at home in match day 8. But what I also want to do is focus on the best teams, which also has PSG in the process, but unfortunately they have no green fixtures on paper. You might still want to have one or two of their assets in the grey fixtures they have throughout the league phase, and these are the teams we should be focusing on when using our wildcard and Limitless chips. So of course I talked about Napoli and all the teams inside the top 10 essentially, but I have replaced Ajax with Atalanta, and this will be the best 16 teams in the Champions League on paper. Not all of them will qualify to the knockout stages, and only the top 8 will qualify directly to the round of 16. The rest will play the knockout playoff rounds between match days 9 and 10. But the other teams worth mentioning here are Atalanta, who face Club Brugge and Slavia Prague at home in match days 2 and 3. They've also got Bilbao at home in match day 7 and Union Saint-Gilloise away in match day 8. With Borussia Dortmund, they've got Copenhagen away in match day 3, Villarreal and Bodo Glimt at home in match days 5 and 6. So those fixtures look pretty decent for them. And Bayer Leverkusen, who just sacked their manager Erik ten Hag, and they've got some decent players still, despite all the departures over the summer. They have Copenhagen away and PSV at home for the first 2 match days, and they round off the league phase with Villarreal at home. Now, Man City don't have great fixtures up until match day 7, arguably, facing Bodo Glimt away and Galatasaray at home, whilst Inter Milan have a great serve opening 4 fixtures, and there's also Ajax away in match day 1, but Slavia Prague at home, Union Saint-Gilloise away, and Kara Almaty between match days 2 and 4 makes them very appealing for the first half of the league phase. And with Atletico Madrid, they've got Frankfurt and Union Saint-Gilloise at home in match days 2 and 4, and also Bodo Glimt at home in match day 8. And finally, we have PSG, but guess what? All of their fixtures are grey or below, so that means they're very difficult fixtures on paper, and that's why they're ranked 20th overall in my FDR. But PSG could still have 1 or 2 players in your Limitless or Wildcard squads, depending on the match day, and even in difficult fixtures, they can win the matches and also provide plenty of UCL fantasy points. But what this will kind of serve as is a guide, so you can target the fixtures or match days you really want to use the Limitless or Wildcard for, and my recommendation is to use both of them early in the league phase. So let's discuss that right now. With the wildcard, I would use it between match days 2 and 4, and then Limitless in match day 5. That's not the only way to play the game, but my biggest recommendation from this video is to use the Limitless chip very early on to target the weakest teams in this competition. And this could also be deployed in match day 2, for example, where a lot of top teams have promising fixtures. And in the case of match day 5, it's the opposite, where a lot of top teams will have some challenging games. They might even face each other, but you can use the Limitless and then go for other teams in the process. I did something similar last season, and whilst I got a very good score from my Limitless chip, I actually did very well with my non-Limitless team, even with some players having difficult fixtures like Gittins away to Real Madrid. He still scored in that game, so sometimes you can still persist with top quality players and they'll produce points irrespective of difficult fixtures on paper. But if you do wildcard in match day 2, what that would allow you to do is build a match day 1 team focusing specifically on this match day only, and you can go for Sporting and Benfica players with their promising fixtures on paper. You can then wildcard them out in match day 2 and then build a solid platform up until the end of the league phase, and the Limitless in between will help you sort out your squad if injuries happen later in this season. And of course, we have multiple international breaks, which could cause some problems as well. Suspensions will play a part, dips in form, fixture swings, you name it. But I do like this sort of chip strategy. Match day 2 is the most likely for me at the moment to wildcard, but as I mentioned before, there is a big downside to wildcarding so early because we don't have so much information about the best teams and players so far this season, and it also would maybe leave you prone to injuries, suspensions and other issues later in the season, especially around October all the way until, let's say, December, for example. And let's not forget January, of course, because the league phase does continue up until that month. But match day 4 might even be the sweet spot here for some people, and it would give you the opportunity to set up a team for the first 3 match days and have more of a balance. And then with more information, you can make informed decisions on your wildcard and pick the ultimate 15-man squad for the rest of the league phase. But as I mentioned before, it's not the only chip strategy. You might even want a Limitless in match day 2 and wildcard in match day 4 in the right sweet spot for the league stage. But I have to say, the wildcard can still be deployed in the knockouts around match day 13, for example, the first leg of the quarterfinals. That's something that I did last season, and it was quite helpful in certain scenarios. I used the Limitless in match day 3 in the previous campaign and wildcarded in match day 13, and ultimately it was decent, but I had more success in the years gone by not just in terms of my overall rank, but also with my Limitless scores reaching over 100 at some stages. And that's when I just used the Limitless when multiple big teams had great fixtures, instead of just using it when these top teams had difficult games on paper. And I also used the wildcard in the group stages as opposed to later in the competition. There are pros and cons behind every single chip strategy, and ultimately this would inform your matchday 1 team selection, so it can be very important to have this in the back of your mind, but you don't need everything penciled in just yet. Just a rough idea of when you would use the Limitless and wildcards, and I have to say matchday 2 or 5 will be the best for the Limitless, and with the wildcard I'm looking at matchdays 2 to 4. Now some people in the comment section might even point towards a matchday 8 wildcard because it's something that I talked about earlier. If you wildcard in the final matchday of the league phase, it would give the ability to have all the lineups at the same time. You can pick the best team on paper for that specific match day, and you can just go for cheap options on your bench and use a lot of money in your starting 11, and that could act as a sort of B-Tech Limitless, so to speak. But ultimately with the wildcard, it's a long-term tool as well, and I think it'll have more value if you use it earlier in the league phase, and you can have multiple match days where those permanent changes really come good for your Champions League squads, and you'll build the best foundation possible for the first 8 match days of the season. It's worth highlighting that I haven't got any specific match day penciled in. It's not all done and dusted. I'm quite flexible in terms of my chip strategy, but with the wildcard and Limitless, I've got a good idea of when I want to use them, particularly in the case of the latter. And for match day 1, as I showed you in the FDR section earlier, you can't use a chip anyway, but only 3 of the top teams have an appealing fixture on paper. And even Spurs facing Villarreal at home, it's not the best fixture you'll ever see anyway. For matchday 2, a lot of the top teams have really appealing fixtures, so it could be quite underrated to use the Limitless then, and then wildcard later on in matchday 4, for example. But we do have that sort of issue of matchday 5, where the majority of the teams will have difficult fixtures on paper, but not all of them. In the case of Napoli, Juventus, also Real Madrid, Liverpool, and Borussia Dortmund, they all have decent fixtures in matchday 5, and if you do wildcard by matchday 4, you can include some of those players there, and they will still have decent fixtures in the match days beforehand. So I think it's quite important to be quite flexible, but my recommendation is to use both of them in the league phase, especially the Limitless. Don't use it in matchday 8, so that does narrow it down to matchdays 2 and 7, which I discussed last season as well. But right now, matchday 2 or 5 looks like the best time to use the Limitless, and for the wildcard, it's quite similar. I would say probably between matchdays 2 and 4 at this moment in time. And if you want more information and you want to stay patient and not just build a team specifically for matchday 1 using unlimited transfers, then matchday 4 for the wildcard might be your best course of action this season. Thank you very much for watching this video and listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it or found it insightful, then like this video, subscribe to my channel, and also the notification bell so you're always up to date with my content for both UCL Fantasy and FPL. Make sure to join my UCL Fantasy League. The code can be seen on screen, SEINOF. There is an auto-join link in the description, and the same goes for my X, Instagram and Blue Sky, Dylan RCM, and there's also my Spotify, the Discord server, and much more that can be found in that description. You can join our great community on Patreon or click the join button on YouTube to gain early access to my videos, amongst many other perks. I'll see you next Tuesday for the first UCL Fantasy Deadline stream of the new season, and keep your eyes peeled for more UCL Fantasy content.